Good afternoon, patrons, and welcome to the November a bit Patroncast. I will actually say, to start off with, this Patroncast was actually supposed to genuinely happen in November. That wasn't just me, as someone cruelly suggested, in the submission thread, kind of updating their comment, that this was me trolling you. No. I don't kind of always want to be, slightly behind and not in the right month. Sometimes, just to mix things up a little bit, I do actually want to be in the right month. In fact, actually, one of them this year was in the right month. I think it might have been June or July, one of those months with 4 letters that's in the summer somewhere. I swear one of those was actually in the right month. And like a schoolboy handing in his homework late, I actually have an excuse for this being a little bit on the late side, which is I was supposed to have some nice kind of free time within this month. I think I'm looking at my calendar. You see, I was supposed to have all this free time, the final week of the month, kind of starting on Monday the 28th. I was supposed to have some free time because I put the submission call out then, or actually I think it might have been actually slightly before. I think it might have been put on the 25th or something. Actually, I should be able to see that. Hang on, I've got it in front of me. That's the sound of my mouse going whir. Yes, it was indeed the 25th. That's nice. So I kind of, I had plenty of time up. So actually the submission thread's been up for over a week. So, you can see from that, I meant it to happen. So I suppose I have this time all free. The problem is, Watch Dogs 2 was late, as you've probably come to realise. Because the thing is, Watch Dogs 2, I was holding off until the PC version. I didn't want to play the PS4 version. Actually, okay, I'm going to confess something here that I'm not going to confess on the main channel. I didn't realise Watch Dogs 2 would come out. Literally, I think it was on the 22nd, because Watch Dogs 2 comes out on PC on the 29th, and the 29th, November 29th, was its original launch date. That was the one they trailed ahead of time. And then at some point, I don't know exactly when, they just decided, I think it was on the 15th of November, that they were going to release the PS4 version. But there wasn't that much buzz about it, really, and because we haven't been doing the podcast for a few weeks because Dan's been arranging to get married, getting married, then going on his honeymoon and all of that stuff. As a result, I probably haven't been watching the game news as closely, so I completely missed that Watch Dogs 2 was out. And then I went to go and see Google. I met up with my YouTube account handler. It's not as fancy as it sounds. This is just a guy who meets me every few months who, takes care of hundreds of YouTubers. So, me and him get on perfectly fine, but it's not I have a dedicated account person who brings me grapes with the seeds removed, and then I yell at him because the kittens he brought to my trailer are the wrong colour or aren't fluffy enough or something. It's just I go and hang out with this guy and we discuss the channel and kind of strategy and what's going to happen going forward, for a little bit on occasions. And towards the end of that meeting, he asked me, is there any interesting stuff that you're doing kind of coming up soon? And I said, oh yeah, when Watch Dogs comes out, next week, I want to be getting right on that on launch day. He turned to me and said, isn't Watch Dogs 2 already out? I said, no, it's not out till next week. It's out on the 29th. And he kind of literally, he looked up on his phone and said, no, look, you can buy it right now. It's in shops. I'm just oh God, I've missed the launch of Watch Dogs 2 by a week and I didn't even bloody realise it. But at that time, I didn't realise that was the PS4 in launch. So I kind of basically ran home as fast as I can, trying to figure out what the hell have I done. And then actually, while I was on the way home, I was rapidly DMing through Twitter everyone I could find who worked for Ubisoft. Be hey, just so you know, can I have some review code, please? Totally excited for Watch Dogs 2. Excited enough that I completely forgot and missed that you'd bloody launched the damn thing. Then I realised, oh, not on PC yet. Okay, thank God. So then, on the channel, I'm just saying I was deliberately waiting for the PC version. Which, in all fairness, I probably would have chosen to wait for anyway, but it wasn't. It was a horrendous accident. Sometimes as a YouTuber with a subscriber count in the 6 figures, I can kind of get coached a little bit early, and sometimes I just have to I actually have to sign a formal NDA, non-disclosure agreement, saying that they're going to give me the code early, and I get to download it and play it early, but I'm not allowed to release it until the point they specify, which is fair because it means I'm not rushed, and it means they don't get story spoilers out there too early. I think that's a fair compromise. But for Watch Dogs 2, I didn't. The thing was actually, in fact, I didn't not only just get it early, I also didn't get it on the 29th. Ubisoft are interesting, because Ubisoft are very, very YouTuber friendly, which is they kind of have a blanket position that any game that they have published, you are allowed to play and put on YouTube and monetize, and they never want to cut, and they'll never make trouble for you, and everything's fine. They're incredibly easy to work with in the games. The problem is, in terms of the way they're organized back end, they're a little bit all over the place. So to give you a counterexample, Square Enix have a dedicated person whose only job it is, well, actually, I'm not sure it's her only job, but one of her entire job functions is basically she is the point of contact for Square Enix and YouTubers. Meaning whenever there's a Square Enix thing that Square Enix are publishing, she will always email us saying, hey, this is coming soon, would you like review code, yes or no? Can you just fill out this quick Google Forms thing I've set up if you want it, and we'll get that over to you. And she gets us the code early, and if I ever need code, I always know she is the person to come to. Ubisoft are great insofar as their corporate position is great, but they don't have a dedicated person who part of their job role is to deal with YouTubers. Instead, they seem to have account handlers for each individual game. So every time a new game comes out, I need to figure out who the right person to speak to is, and they may or may not care more or less about YouTubers. You just don't know. So some of them are really up for it, and some of them will make sure you get code nice and early, and they're really super friendly and helpful. And some of them seem a little bit less interested. And that doesn't mean like they hate YouTubers. It just means like maybe they're busier, or maybe they don't consider it a higher priority, or maybe like there has been a change in the corporate in terms of like how much time they're allowed to spend dealing with YouTubers. But on this particular occasion, I think I finally got the review code. This was technically labelled as review code for Watch Dogs 2 on Friday the 2nd of December after it launched to the public on the 29th. So, you know, this makes Bethesda's review policy look positively generous, that rather than it just being, oh, we'll only give it to you the day before, it's, we'll give it to you 3 days later. And they were very apologetic. Like, I was kind of constantly in Twitter communication with this guy, and I think he was trying his hardest, but he just come across some form of technical difficulty where, like, he just couldn't get hold of European code, because Uplay is region locked. I think it is anyway. I haven't actually checked that, but he was talking about European code, so I'm assuming like the PS4, it is actually region locked, which is really unfortunate. So like, and that does happen, by the way. Sometimes when I'm asking for PS4 code, like the different territories can get code at different points. I don't know what's going on at publishers sometimes, but it was kind of unfortunate that clearly like he had like code for other territories, he didn't have European code. So I didn't get it for quite a while. So like I was originally saying, like, in fact, even I think actually I commented on the Final Fantasy video on Tuesday saying, don't worry, Watch Dogs 2 is coming tomorrow. And then it didn't, so I kind of had to put out Agony, and that wasn't really planned to go out on Wednesday, but it just had to be kind of uploaded the same day. I thought, okay, so Watch Dogs 2 will happen on Thursday. I thought, okay, now then Watch Dogs 2 tomorrow. Then it didn't happen then either because the code didn't arrive. So then I was kind of panicking. It's like, okay, what the hell am I going to put out on Thursday? So then, some of you may recall this, I've mentioned this before. I keep a backlog of videos, emergency videos, some of them going back a very long way. Like some of them were made like over a year ago, and I thought, funny, you know what? The emergency videos for Swindle, which I made shortly after they came out on the PS4, which I believe I may have recorded at my old house, in fact, before we moved to the current place I'm living now. So that would be like a year and a half plus ago. So yeah, we kind of finally put out Swindle, and Swindle did remarkably well. Like, more people, well, not quite more people, but a similar comparable number of people watched the first part of Swindle as would have watched a normal Fallout 4 video. So, you know, that made me feel pretty bloody stupid for just sitting on that video for a bloody year and a half, not putting out, thinking, I'm not sure this video is that good, I just won't put it out. Maybe we'll just kind of keep it back for emergencies and then never use it for a year and a half. No, apparently everybody wanted to bloody see Swindle. But we'll come back to Swindle and its numbers shortly, because there's something else interesting about that. But yeah, finally I got the code on Friday, so I made the part up for Saturday, and there's going to be more Watch Dogs today. Today's Sunday, I'm literally recording this on Sunday. I think you're going to get it on Sunday as well. So, you know, only a few days later. It's probably still November in Australia or something. And then we'll have a bit more Watch Dogs going forward. So I don't know if Watch Dogs 2 is going to be like a full series, by the way. I'll definitely do like a little bit of it, because genuinely I think it's quite fun. I'm not sure which I prefer out of Watch Dogs 1 and 2, actually. Watch Dogs 1, I think Chicago was better and more interesting and had more variety in it than what I've seen of San Francisco so far. So actually, I think I kind of prefer the world of Watch Dogs 1, and like there's been some omissions in Watch Dogs 2. I mean, I'm hoping they'll show up yet, but like the random intrusions that you could take part in, which really kind of made you feel like Aiden Pierce was as much of the bad guy as the bad guys. You could just go around like intruding on people's lives and spying on them, and it was kind of slightly dodgy, but it worked as a metaphor and a way of kind of displaying, hey, by the way, this whole technology hacking thing, it's pretty bad. And, you know, it worked for the theme of the game about privacy and whereas, like, that seems to have gone in Watch Dogs 2. And the convoy missions are gone. I haven't seen a convoy mission. I'm about 10 hours in. Like, I think what you've had uploaded so far represents about 4 hours? Maybe, yeah, 5 hours of playtime. Just kind of edited down quite heavily. But yeah, the convoy missions don't seem to have come back, which is a shame. Which were the missions where the game basically said, hey, this crime boss or whatever is starting at this point, and he's going to drive to this point. You can see the route on the map, and you need to pick the point to ambush him and figure out how you're going to do it. Those were my favourite missions, because they rewarded, like, tactical planning and laying out roadblocks, and you could use high-powered sniper rifles while you were perched in really good sniper spots. They were so good, and they don't seem to be in the game anymore. So they've taken out some of the stuff. It feels just a little bit less organic and a little bit more empty. It's very pretty, and what's there is very, very polished, but it feels like what's there might be a little bit less than what was there in Watch Dogs 1. So yeah, it kind of feels like they've taken out some stuff, but the stuff that's left in has expanded slightly, so it doesn't feel like it's a bigger game, it just feels like it's a slightly alternate game, so, which is fine, because I really love Watch Dogs 1, which means I'm really enjoying Watch Dogs 2, and, like, just occasionally you'll come across just, like, a bit of something that will just happen at random, like, you can just kind of, like, what I found is there's this new power-up where you can point at someone and basically fake a police record for them, and the police come and arrest them. If you do that to somebody who's walking a dog, and there's no one else around, and you pet the dog while he's being arrested, the dog decides you're his new owner, and starts following you around, which is beautiful. When stuff like that happens, Watch Dogs 2 is just a joy, because it's really good at just kind of coming up with random stuff out of nowhere. But the other big thing, of course, going back to Swindlers, what I was hinting at earlier is, of course, right now we're in a bit of a weird moment for YouTube right now, which is, you know, probably you may well have seen kind of floating around. There's a lot of kind of panic and outrage and clickbait titles about how YouTube's done something. YouTube has done something, but we're not quite sure what it is, because the way that YouTube communicates is basically when there's a disaster, they decide that they're going to go completely silent. Sorry, I shouldn't use the word disaster, that makes me sound panicky and outragey. YouTube has done something that's upset a lot of people. The problem is because they don't even acknowledge it's happened, it's very hard to figure out what has actually happened. What has happened is some combination of the following thing, which is views have gone down, views are being misreported, sub-feeds are broken, or subscription numbers are incorrect. Or some of the above, like something maybe either going down or just being misreported, which is kind of, it's really difficult to know which is which. Because if you kind of ask me, are my views going down or are my views being misreported? Well, I don't know, because the only way I know what my views are from the reports YouTube provides to me. So, you know, it's like asking someone, hey, you seeing a hallucination right now? They can't know, because the only thing that they've got to see with are their eyes and their brain, and their eyes and their brain are seeing something, but it may or may not be a hallucination. They don't know, and I don't know. So I've no idea right now. Like, what I am seeing right now is some weird things that don't make any sense. Like, insofar as, like, which videos do better versus worse. Like, everything I know about the channel suggests the last week has been wrong, which is in terms of, like, how viewed videos have been, which has been, like, Swindle doing as well or better than some of the Fallout 4 at the top. That all did better than Agony. Agony did better than Final Fantasy 15, and Final Fantasy 15 did better than the Golf Club VR. And I know VR videos normally do pretty damn well, and Final Fantasy 15 should have done pretty well. Like, normally a new release that comes out on the same day the game comes out should do pretty damn well. So, like, I don't really see how it all fits together. It feels like something's wrong. The problem is I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's that, like, YouTube isn't putting videos onto subscription feeds, or some people are being unsubscribed. And, like, I think it's some combination of all the above, because, like, subscription growth recently has definitely been, like, since the point, like, a week or so ago where they say this started happening, subscription growth has definitely been slow. Views look like they're down, or at least they're a little bit more inconsistent and weird and all over the place than they should be normally. And that could be something YouTube's done wrong, it could be a reporting issue, or it could mean that people are being unsubscribed more. I genuinely don't know. Nobody knows. Which is kind of unfortunate, because this is kind of the time of the year. Like, YouTube's a very inconsistent career, just so you know. Like, when you're making your money on YouTube, like, basically, well, in gaming, sorry, this is a gaming specific thing. You do very well from September through to November, or arguably September through to December, but less so. Really kind of like harvest time for YouTubers is September through to November. Because loads of games are coming out, and loads of companies want to sell those games, and therefore loads of companies want to run gaming-related adverts ahead of Christmas shopping, Thanksgiving, and to coincide with all the big launches for those things. So as a result of that, YouTubers get decently paid in the gaming space from September to November. So, like, you know, November time is a bad time for this sort of thing to happen, where we don't really know what's happening. And it seems to have hit the biggest channels worse. The thing is, and this is the bit that confuses me, which is, if there's a loser, there must be a winner. Because in YouTube, it's a bit of a zero-sum game. If big YouTubers, as they claim, are seeing, like, massive reductions in the number of views they're getting, then someone else must be getting those views instead. Because YouTube is a sensible, hard-headed, massive business. If there were literally, like, less views in the system on account of a change they'd made, they would roll back the change immediately to get the number of views back to what they were. Because YouTube wants as many views as possible, because views means ad views, and ad views means money, and that's what keeps YouTube afloat. They will do anything to optimize the total number of views or the total number of watch minutes. They might sacrifice views for minutes watched, theoretically, but probably not too much, because there's still too many people who are buying adverts on a CPM, cost per melee basis, i.e. cost per thousand, so people who are just buying ads per view. So as a result, if YouTube hasn't rolled back these changes or hasn't admitted there's a problem or tried to fix it urgently or just gone back to the old system, as a result, those views must be somewhere. The number of views in the system must be the same or higher, or YouTube would have abandoned the change. So if big YouTubers have lost a large number of views, who's getting those views instead? Because no one's put their hand up and said, I'm getting the views instead. Now, you'd think somebody would have done. If someone was getting massively more views than they've ever got before, you'd think they would have made themselves known by now, or someone would have figured out who these people are by now. So I'm not quite sure who those people are, and if no one stood up to say I'm getting more views, but some people are claiming they're getting less views, that suggests it might hopefully just be a reporting bug, and actually these big channels are getting more views than they think they're getting, and as a result, like, actually nothing's happened but a reporting bug. I don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. And this is why some YouTubers are panicking, because, like, YouTube is notoriously tight-lipped when this sort of thing happens. They just refuse to talk about it. They just quietly fix it in the back end or figure out what's going on or change stuff and just kind of hope it works out in the end. So some people have got a bit panicked because some people are thinking their, like, livelihood is going kind of rapidly downhill and they don't even know why. So that's why some people are panicking. I'm not panicking personally because I haven't seen a huge impact. I've seen what looks like a very slight decline, but equally, it's the beginning of December. I would kind of expect the beginning of December to get slightly less views than I would during November. I expect a gentle tapering off of views into December and then more of a drop off in January because there's less games coming out, and in general you always just see a bit of a drop in January. January's going to be tough. January's always tough for a YouTuber because not only do the views drop off, the amount of advertisers that want to buy ads and thus the value of ads and how much I get paid for ads, because, you know, ads basically do just work by standard supply and demand. So the amount of ad revenue I'm going to get from YouTube is going to significantly drop into January, because that's exactly what happened last year. It's exactly what happens every single year I've done YouTube and I've actually been running ads in description. So that is absolutely guaranteed to happen. That's going to be rough because, you know, YouTube is kind of a job where, you know, anyone who's doing any job doesn't want to see in 1 month suddenly their income's just half from what it was the month before. That's never good. But yeah, it's inconsistent. Like, one of the questions that actually does come up, sorry, I occasionally skip to questions when they're kind of relevant to what I'm talking about in general. One of the questions that come up is like, how does YouTube compare to what I was doing before, or expecting, or hoping for, or da-da-da-da. The thing is about YouTube is, yeah, it's massively inconsistent. Like, it's insecure. Not just insecure insofar as, like, you know, everything, your channel could be deleted if you get multiple copyright strikes, or YouTube or you or the games you play might go out of fashion by next month and your income could just drop off a cliff. Even if none of that stuff happens, just as a function of how advertising works, like, you're going to make inconsistent amounts month on month, but, you know, the amount you need to pay to live in your home and heat your home and eat food and stuff like that doesn't change month on month. That's standard. You can't just kind of write to the bank and say, yeah, sorry, can't give you money this month, sorry about that, we happen to make less from the ad revenue. Would you believe they're very unsympathetic to that sort of thing? Which is why Patreon's here. Hello, thank you, patrons. You keep this thing going. It means I can literally kind of have a baseline level of income that means I can actually plan my life and know I can afford to do the basics of living and all of that. So that's nice. So yeah, YouTube, it's going to be fun when we hit January. Like, nobody likes it. It's a kind of a running joke that we kind of all share with a bit of gallows humor. Like, me and Matt and Dan have discussed it in the past. It's grim when we hit January as a gamer, because I don't know exactly how much less I'm going to be paid in January when compared to December or November, but it's going to be quite significantly less. I'm not going to acknowledge it right now, because nothing I can do about it. It's going to happen, so there's not really much point dwelling on it. Ooh, one other very important thing, actually, before we get into the questions, as has come up before, and actually as did come up in these questions as well, though I was planning to do this anyway, some people have asked in the past, they find it hard to find the old Patroncast, so could I set up a playlist of previous Patroncasts? Previously, I haven't done this because, as far as I was aware, playlists were always, or at least they always used to be public, meaning anyone who came to my channel and looked in the playlist tab would actually have seen that straight away. I'm not sure if this is a recent innovation, but there's definitely unlisted playlists now. I think this might have been added recently. So I have set one of those up, which now contains every single Patroncast, including this one. So I will link to that in both the description of this video on YouTube, and also it will be in the kind of little text section on the actual Patreon post where I put this Patroncast up as well. So if you want to go through and watch the old ones, which will take you like probably the better part of a full day or something, These are often an hour or more, and there are, how many, I think it's like, might be number 17 or something. So yeah, that will take you quite a while to do. But if you do want to go back through all of them, it is now much easier than it used to be thanks to that playlist. The other reason I've not previously set up the playlist, by the way, is because once there's a playlist, then theoretically, if I was just always updating the same playlist, because anyone who was feeling particularly cynical who had that URL would then be able to get access to all the future Patroncasts, even if they actually weren't a Patreon supporter anymore. So as a result, basically, like every so often, and potentially every month if I can remember to do it, I'll actually scrap that playlist, create a new one with the new episode in it, and then share that new one each Patroncast. So hopefully that makes sense if you see what I'm doing there. Alright, into the questions and starting from the oldest to the newest on this particular occasion. What's coming for the new year? I think the overall shape of the new year is going to be, well, the actual kind of new year in terms of like, you know, the stuff that's literally happening in January is probably going to be very similar to what's happening now. What I kind of think for the early year, however, is like the next few big changes that are happening are, what I'm kind of thinking is, and by the way, I caveat everything in these Patroncasts is caveated with, this may not happen. These are my plans, but my plans shift as much as my schedule does for videos, and that shifts an awful bloody lot. So all of this is kind of subject to change. This is just my current thinking that I do try and update you on each month. What I think is kind of like the most likely shape of the channel going forward for like the big stuff is once we're done with New Vegas Survive Mode, which is probably going to be pretty early into next year, that's when we go into the original Fallout. We're going to do Fallout 1. I'm really curious how that does. I really hope that does well, because it's possible that might not do anywhere near as well as Fallout 3 New Vegas. It depends, because I think a lot of people who are in this channel are the sort of people who are most into Fallout 3 and New Vegas, and therefore interested in 4. And there's actually going to be a lot of people watching who have never played the original Fallout, and it just depends whether people who came into Fallout later are interested in what's now a very, very old school RPG and are curious about the origins of Fallout, or if actually it's not really the sort of Fallout they're used to, so they're not interested. I really hope they are. I genuinely don't know. I kind of hope it works. I'm not sure if it's going to. So hopefully that does. Because if that stops working as well, that's a big series for us. So if that stops kind of getting as many views as like Fallout 3 and New Vegas always have traditionally done, then that could be a little bit on the concerning side. Once Mass Effect 2 is done, I suspect that's going to transition into Skyrim at that point. Mass Effect 2 will probably give way to Skyrim. And Fallout 4, this is something I've kind of been thinking about a lot recently. Fallout 4 Survival Mode is probably going to cover the rest of Far Harbor and then the rest of the base game in a bit more kind of bits and pieces. We will visit Nuka World, but I don't think we're actually going to do a full Survival Mode Nuka World playthrough with the current playthrough with Grill's Bears. And there's a reason for that, which is I've previously kind of discussed and kind of thought about, and me and Matt have had a lot of discussions about this. I like the idea of actually, because Nuka World, I think, isn't that, like, it's not hugely difficult. And I think kind of like for Grill's Bears, it would not be that difficult in the slightest. So for the most part, especially as I did, I think pretty much a 100% run through Nuka World with Bacon during No Guns, I'm not sure I'd necessarily be showing off anything new. And also, like, I think survival mode works best when it's kind of at its most challenging and difficult and interesting. So therefore what I'm thinking about is once we've kind of wrapped up the main game and Far Harbor, and possibly we'll also go and do Vault-Tec, that'll probably just be like a very quick whiz through, because if you theoretically want to do Vault-Tec very quickly, it's basically easy to speedrun that in seconds if you want to do. It's incredibly, well, not seconds, but you know what you could do? You could basically speedrun Vault-Tec in like 30 minutes very, very easily with no problems whatsoever. So once we've kind of done all that, I'm thinking I might do a low-level Nuka World with a new character. Because the thing is, while the actual radio signal doesn't come in calling you to Nuka World until you get to level 30, there's actually nothing to stop you going there earlier on, unlike all the other DLC, which only actually spawns in at the relevant level, whatever the level requirement is. Yeah, when it comes to Nuka World, there's nothing to stop you rocking up there at level 1. There's no invisible walls. Like, the moment you begin the game, you can go over there. It's just incredibly difficult to do because the enemies aren't leveled to you. They're way, way harder than they should be. So the game doesn't just say, oh, that's a level 1 character, let's just put nice, easy baby enemies in. No, no, no. There's nasty, horrendous things that will absolutely murder you in Nuka World. So I'm thinking a good way to get some of the drama and difficulty back into the survival mode series. And I think, like, you know, the best survival mode stuff was, like, in the first, say, 10 to 20 parts, when it was a lot more difficult and terrifying, would be to get a new character and try and do Nuka World at level 1. Obviously, like, I think kind of the rules would maybe be like, as long as I arrive there at level 1, that's fine. I'm allowed to level up like to level 2 the moment I actually kind of get there and I'm doing nuka worldy stuff. But as long as I actually kind of arrive there at level 1, that's all fair play. And at that point, trying to complete the entirety of Nuka World starting from level 1. I think that sounds fun on survival mode. That strikes me as fun. So that's probably what's coming up kind of next for the big series, I think. That's kind of like the big stuff. I actually suspect that will actually perk up the survival mode stuff, because it's kind of like restarting a little bit. Well, it is restarting. It's literally restarting. It's a new character. And normally, like, when you restart something, the first part, something gets a lot more views. I think it'll just jazz up the numbers a bit, because some people who've just like maybe fallen a few parts behind in Fallout 4 survival mode as it currently is, kind of look at them and think, oh, part 52, part 53, I don't want to watch a 50-part series. Whereas if I go right back to the beginning and there's a new starting point for people who've fallen behind to get back into it again, it'll probably work a bit better. So that's probably going to work really well. Skyrim, I'm pretty confident it's going to work very well, because I did those, I very intentionally did this. When I did the Skyrim Special Edition, I did those 3 parts to see like how many people watch the first part and then how many people go on to parts 2 and 3, and it was a really good retention. Like, there seems to be a lot of interest in Skyrim, so Skyrim Special Edition is absolutely coming back as well. I'm pretty confident that'll do pretty well, but maybe not necessarily like Fallout 3 and New Vegas well, but it'll do pretty well. The big question is whether the original Fallout will do well. I really hope it does. But if it doesn't, I feel like Skyrim will be able to take up some of the slack. Like, I think Skyrim's going to get a hell of a lot more views than Mass Effect 2 is doing. So that will kind of help pick up the slack a little bit. After that's done, well, that will probably take us right up to the point where Fallout 4 VR's coming out. I want to do at least some videos on Fallout 4 VR. The problem is I don't know whether there's going to be a full series. It might be a very short series there. The thing is, like, VR is absolutely amazing, and I can like try and make it look as nice as I can by, you know, making sure the videos are in 60 FPS and whatever. But like, I think there's just a disconnect in VR, and this is a problem for VR on YouTube. There's a disconnect between what I'm experiencing and what you're seeing that makes it much more incredibly impressive to me experiencing it. To you, there's an excellent chance it will look pretty much exactly like Fallout 4 ever did, except probably with kind of worse swaying and head bob, because I'm literally kind of moving my head and looking around and stuff. For me, it will be absolutely incredible. So that will probably be a fairly short series. And once that's done, we're probably going to be looking at Fallout 4 You Only Live Once. Again, this is all caveated and may not necessarily happen. I think that's probably time for Fallout 4 You Only Live Once after we've looked at Fallout 4 VR, and roughly at that point, and I don't know how long the original Fallout series would take too, but like once that's done, maybe we'll look at one of the mods. I'm kind of thinking maybe Fallout New Vegas Dust or Fallout 4 Frost, one or both of those. Again, like that won't be long series, those will be relatively short series, so I might just kind of do one of those two, but I don't really know which one we shall see. Anyway, that was quite a long answer for a question that was only actually 6 words long, what's coming for the new year, so I should probably move on to the next one. How did I meet Dan, and did he want to work with you or you with him? As someone very politely actually answered in the comments, yes, this has come up before, and it was indeed for the GTA heist. But as some people might not know, I've never actually met Dan in person. I've met Matt in person a few times now. 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5, I don't know. I've met Matt in person a few times now. Matt's a good friend, I like Matt. But Dan, I've never actually met in person. He's very private. He's a very, very private individual, so that's not too surprising. So yeah, he definitely, he basically approached me to work with him on the GTA heist, but I don't know exactly on what basis he decided I would be the right person to do that. I tell you what, ask him. Next time he's doing a flipping Q&A or an Ask Me Anything on Reddit or whatever, ask him, because I genuinely don't know on what basis he decided that my channel, which at the time was really, really tiny, I think it was like a fifth of the size of what it is now, I think it was like 50,000 subscribers or something, on which basis he, when he was, I think at that point he was he 1.5 million? I think he was 1.5 million and I was 50,000. He decided that I would be a good person to have on the heist. So, I don't know how he decided to do that, he just decided that would be a thing. So, you know, ask him, because I don't know. I never see achievements pop up during your playthroughs. I've been wondering, do you care at all about achievements, or are you playing Steam games with the overlay off so the achievement pop-up doesn't appear on screen, or have you got the achievements by the time you do a playthrough? On Steam, I think I've got the overlay disabled, so that shouldn't ever pop up. You may notice occasionally when I'm playing console games, they'll pop up. So my recent Final Fantasy video, I think there's a couple of achievements that pop up during the video. I don't mind that. They just kind of take me out of it. I find them immersion breaking. Because, like, for me, one of the most important things a game can do is properly immerse you in the world. So you kind of, you forget you're sitting in a seat holding a controller looking at a screen. You're actually kind of really engaged with the world. And, like, literally having Steam or the Xbox pop up and saying, hey, Xbox achievement. That's literally the console basically saying, hey, just a reminder, you're playing on a console. You're sitting in front of a computer. This isn't actually real. Like, there cannot be anything more immersion breaking than a little pop-up that pops up saying, hey, just a reminder, this isn't real. So I hate those. So I try to turn them off because I do find they take me out of it a little bit. I mean, sometimes they're quite fun. Like, I quite like the joke that came out of Final Fantasy's achievement, which was one popped up at the end of chapter 1 when all the characters just run up to the cliff and we're looking down a ruined city, and it was the big sad moment with the sad music. Oh no, sad thing. The achievement popped up, kind of this cheery, flashy X. Hey, achievement unlocked. Sad moment. There's a sad thing happening. Achievement unlocked. Emotions. That was great fun. So sometimes the achievements just happen to create accidental comedy. But yeah, for the most part, I just kind of turn them off on the Steam overlay. I'm not sure you can disable them on console. If I'm wrong, tell me how to disable achievements popping up on the Xbox One, because I don't know where that bloody setting is. Not least as the Xbox One UI is a bloody mess, but I have no idea where that is. Which historical figure or time period would you like to see a game or TV show made about? Theatre of the 5th century BC in Athens. Because those guys, like, Euripides and Aristophanes and Sophocles, these guys all knew each other. We don't know much about what they thought about each other, albeit we know that Aristophanes liked mocking all his probably friends on stage, which I'm sure they were absolutely thrilled about. There's some really interesting stories, which is, this was a period of huge interesting stuff happening with Athens. Athens kind of going from nothing to kind of winning, albeit winning sort of by default, some really major wars, to going on to having its own little sort of empire. They're not really an empire as we'd understand it today, more just like some slightly subjugated allies, and it's quite complicated. It would take me a long time if I got into the details. And then going from that into a period of what to them would have seemed like a golden age, to going into losing some more local wars and then ultimately being completely subjugated. And while all of this was happening, there were these people who were writing plays, some of the finest plays that have ever been created, Greek tragedy and also Greek comedy. People talk more about Greek tragedy, to be honest, but Greek comedy is really interesting as well. And what's really fascinating is to watch these things change over time. In particular, comedy. I absolutely love Aristophanes. Aristophanes writes these kind of slightly ridiculous, surrealist bawdy plays, and I really like surrealism in my comedy. And sometimes his comedies can be a little bit on the dark side, and I like a bit of dance. I like dark, surreal comedy, which lots of British comedy shows do very, very well. Things like Monkey Dust were absolutely fantastic and stuff like that. Dark and surrealism is absolutely brilliant. One of the things I love about Aristophanes' plays is, like, you can kind of track how the war's going through his comedies. And at first he asks for peace, but clearly, it's not like a life or death thing. But as the plays go on, it gets a bit more desperate. And by the time we get to, like, some of the later plays he's written, like we get to The Frogs, like the entire plot of The Frogs is the main characters have to go down into the underworld to fetch old dead poets, and they need to fetch those old dead poets back to Athens, because those old poets, the good old poets who had passed away, needs to basically be brought to get Athens back into shape, because Athens is going to lose the war if some good old-fashioned poets don't come out and sort everything out for them. And there's like this constant undercurrent of, hey, by the way, just so you know, the only reason we're doing this is because we're imminently going to lose the war. For God's sakes, you need to change something right now, because if we don't change, we're all going to flipping die. So there's this really grim undercurrent to this kind of quite bawdy comedy. And Athens did lose that war. Absolutely. They lost the war, they were subjugated, and Aristophanes kept writing plays. He survived. And after that point, his plays stopped being political. Before that point, his plays were very, very political. And then he starts writing these much weaker plays. Generally, like all modern scholars consider that his plays written after Athens was taken were just vastly, vastly worse. But they're completely politically unengaged anymore. We don't know whether he didn't dare or whether he just kind of completely lost interest and hope in politics to fix anything anymore, but all of a sudden, like, he stopped addressing the audience and pleading with them to do certain political things. His comedy was no longer political. It was just these kind of random, bawdy, surreal things that didn't really mean anything. It was just fluffy stuff. It's tragic. It's as tragic as a bawdy comedy's ever going to get, because there was this man who cared so much in his own comic, poetic way about Athens, and he watched his city fall and the form of government fall, everything that his life was built around collapse, and he kept writing, but he couldn't talk about politics anymore, and we don't know whether he couldn't bear it or why, but I think it's fascinating. And he had to watch like his friend Euripides die, because Euripides died while Aristophanes was still alive. In fact, Euripides is one of the two poets. They suggest going down into the underworld to actually get back out again to come and save Athens. So Aristophanes clearly liked Euripides. He kind of mocked Euripides constantly while Euripides was alive. When Euripides died, Aristophanes, like, in one of his next plays was just like, hey, we need to go down to the underworld to literally go and get Euripides back because he was so awesome and cool, he could save the city. It's just like, they were clearly friends. They were friends and they mocked each other. But there was clearly real warmth of, it's just lovely. Damn it, just make a damn TV series. Like HBO's Rome, except like in ancient Greece, and like centred on like politicians and poets rather than on soldiers. That'd be so much better. Go on, do that, somebody please. If I could change one thing about my channel currently, what would it be? I'd probably do a tiny bit less Fallout. And that's actually kind of what that schedule I was talking earlier about is for, which is when we shift from Fallout 4's current survival to like level 1 survival in Nuka World, I'll probably lower that to 1 episode a week. And then we'll kind of also have New Vegas going into Fallout 1, which will be 1 episode a week, and Skyrim will be 1 episode a week. And then we'll be down to, those 3, which will free up a little bit more time for other stuff. Because right now, with 2 episodes of Fallout 4 and New Vegas, and also like the other series I run, particularly like, a running series on Saturday that right now is Mass Effect 2, and Tuesday and Thursday strategy series, I don't feel like I've got quite enough space to do enough new stuff each week. And I kind of want to be able to do more new stuff. Because, like, people like just seeing new stuff, and generally, like, new stuff does better than, like, the strategy series on Tuesday and Thursday, though I love doing the strategy series on Tuesday and Thursday. If there's one thing that, like, I'm not sure necessarily works right now, it's Mass Effect 2. I love Mass Effect 2, I love playing it, and I love the fact that people are enjoying it, but it's not appealing to a huge proportion of the channel, which is why I probably want to wrap that up relatively soon, and why I'm not going to do all the DLC. For Mass Effect 2, I'm going to skip Arrival and Overlord, which in all fairness, most people don't generally regard as the best anyway, as long as I've done all the characters and Shadow Broker, and I'll probably actually relent and I'll probably do Firewalker just so I can show off the hammerhead thingy anyway. But I'm not convinced that part's necessarily working, so I probably want to do a tiny bit less Fallout, so I'm going to swap out a tiny bit of Fallout for a little bit of Skyrim, which I'm hoping therefore people won't mind, because I suspect Skyrim people consider that a fair trade, because it's still a Bethesda game of about the same era, so I think that's going to be a fair trade, and we're going to make a very slow movement in that direction starting in 2017. What is replacing Civ 6? I think I've mentioned this previously, but it's now definitely firmed up if I wasn't saying with absolute certainty last time. It's Rome Total War. I've recorded the first 2 parts of that. I think it is a good series so far. I'm hoping it's going to do well. Time of recording, obviously, it hasn't actually gone out yet. The first part's coming out on Tuesday, and then the second on Thursday. It will be the standard Tuesday-Thursday layout. I'm hoping it's going to do well. I don't know. Like, last time I did Rome Total War was a long time ago. I think that was, like, July 2015. But, like, for July 2015, I feel like that got a lot of views. So I'm hoping that's going to do well, but I don't really know. Do I have a secret YouTube account and occasionally troll people on my channel? I do have secret YouTube accounts, but they're not for trolling people on the channel. Some of them are for very boring procedural back-end reasons, which is why there's actual multiple Many a True Nerd Google accounts, which is for various extremely boring reasons. And I have one personal YouTube account that I just basically use for just watching the videos I want to watch, which basically means when I sit down in the evening, I just open up 2 browsers, and for the most part, like in one browser, we'll be all logged in as the Many a True Nerd stuff, and I'll be just monitoring that, and in the other browser, I'll just be logged in my personal account, and I'll just be watching stuff like that. But I never actually use that account for anything. In fact, I believe that account has never commented on Many a True Nerd. So that's just for my own personal use. It's not used for trolling purposes. Which Fallout 4 faction do you think is morally best for the long run? I probably, on reflection, would stick close to the conclusion I came to on my original Fallout 4 playthrough, which is working under the assumption that you can simultaneously be both the director of the Institute and the general of the Minutemen, and you're running both of them. And indeed, as director of the Institute, you actually have, presumably, in real life, you would have a great degree of leeway to change how they do stuff, and thus you could make sure all the unethical stuff that's happened in the past wouldn't happen again. That would probably be for the best. The Minutemen taking care of small stuff that actually matters to people on the surface, and the Institute quietly getting on with innovating down below and not really getting involved with stuff up top. Because as for the Brotherhood, you can't lead the Brotherhood, so there's only so much you can do to change their direction. You can't lead the Railroad either. Plus the Railroad, I think, would be massively short-handed for doing pretty much anything, so I feel like the Railroad would really struggle to maintain control and actually help people in any meaningful way day to day. So I feel like Minutemen and Institute together, assuming you genuinely could change the direction of the Institute as director, would probably be for the best. If you're incapable of changing the Institute, like for some reason, like they just keep doing all the stuff they've been doing, they probably do need to go down at that point. At which point, probably the Brotherhood? Because sure, the Brotherhood are kind of jerks to synths, but for the most part, when the Brotherhood sweep in and they pick their targets, they pick targets that are good. You know, they want to wipe out super mutants and feral ghouls and rampaging mad robots from Automaton. Like, for the most part, the Brotherhood, when they come in, are doing things that the average person living in the Commonwealth would think, yes, that is fundamentally a good thing. These are big, tough people with big, tough guns, and overwhelmingly, 99% of the time, they're pointing their guns at the things I am worried about. So, probably, yeah, it's either the Brotherhood and the Minutemen together, though admittedly, whether the Brotherhood would actually play nicely with the Minutemen. Actually, they probably would, because the Minutemen aren't really reliant on technology, aside from the fact they'd probably have their laser muskets confiscated off them. But other than that, like, I imagine that just as like a relatively low-tech militia force, the Brotherhood would be fine just letting the Minutemen get on with it, as long as they didn't turn each other, but I don't really see any ideological reason they'd have to come to conflict. So, probably one of those two. Top 3 and bottom 3 games of 2016. Oh, come on, I'm going to be doing the Many a True Nerd 2016 awards. You can wait for that. But I don't think it'll come as any surprise that, you know, games like Civ 6, Stellaris, Dishonored 2 are looking very, very high up the list, as is Firewatch, though we haven't really decided on the final order yet. John, how much of a role do you think your Worms election special played in Donald Trump's victory? I think none, because my political simulator clearly predicted that actually Hillary Clinton, though she was miles ahead in the polls, was actually going to be beaten to the nomination by Bernie Sanders, which didn't happen, and therefore, even though my political simulator did say Donald Trump would be victorious in the end, which turned out to be completely right, then I don't think I was personally responsible, because clearly there are still some kinks in the political simulation machine. After building the Many a True PC, have I kept up any interest in PC building or any thoughts on upgrading? Yes, indeed. I'm going to have to upgrade in the new year because, well, Fallout 4 VR is going to be possibly the most intensive game ever created, because VR games have to be incredibly intensive, mainly because they have to be running at an absolute consistent, silky smooth 90 frames a second, and just in general, VR games are very, very intensive, so I don't think this PC is going to be up to it, so I'm going to need a much bigger, meatier PC. So I'm probably going to spend quite a bit more. Like, I think I spent about $1,500 US or so on the PC I've got right now. I think I'm probably going to, maybe not double that, but I'm certainly going to increase that a fair bit for the next one, because we're going to need something that's really damn meaty. You know, like, GPU's probably going to be the 1080 or whatever the new version of the 1080 that's coming out in the new year is going to be. It's going to be something pretty damn meaty to deal with all the challenges that VR is going to start throwing up over time. Do I have a special rule set in mind for when I play Rome Total War, and what is my favourite faction? The Brutii are the best faction, because from the intro sequence you're clearly playing as supervillains. They're absolute flipping evil monsters, and they're totally okay with that fact. They have, like, the best religion in the game. The religions you get to pick from are fantastic. They, like, you know, logically expand in the right direction to get all the world wonders. Just like the Brutii are easily the best Roman faction. They're great fun. Other than that, I really enjoy playing as the Seleucids, actually. Mainly because the Seleucids is a really difficult campaign, because you're surrounded by people that will constantly be going to war with you, but you also get like a blend of all the best units in the game. Like, you get like cool little legionary stuff, but you also get the pikemen. I think you get chariots as well. Like, you get like a bunch of everything. So it's just really fun to play as the Seleucids. They've got a really fun army. Plus, it's nice to be kind of like a culturally Hellenic faction surrounded by non-Hellenic factions, because like it means you can kind of feel like you're spreading Hellenic culture through the Middle East, which I think is quite fun. Have you ever thought of a Fallout rule set that might be fun but never made it into a video, or you scrap for one reason or another? Basically anything that's too limited. Like, elsewhere in these questions someone like asks after, like, there's a mod where you can like play as Dogmeat, so you can play as the Dogman. That'd be fun. Like, it's the sort of thing that, like, I know might be funny for, like, one video, but couldn't sustain a series at all beyond one part. So for the most part, like, I don't do stuff like that. One that comes up a lot, say, is explosive zoning, which unquestionably kind of sounds like it might be fun, but I suspect, like, you know, I couldn't get more than a few parts out of before it gets really, really repetitive. So it's more about, like, whether I can actually make a proper series out of it, or whether I think it will get boring quickly. There's loads of stuff which, like, people suggest to me, where absolutely I can see where they're coming from, because it sounds like it will be funny, and, like, you know, a really fun little episode or two, but I can't do them because they're too limited. The stuff I do has to have legs to be able to actually kind of extend and keep it going long enough to actually play through a full game using that rule set. Do a Donald Trump impression? No, I can't. I cannot even remotely. I'd probably just end up saying short, extremely staccato sentences and then say sad, tragic, very unhappy at the end of them. Would you consider playing Save the Date? It's a dating sim of sorts with a twist, better to play with no spoilers. You weren't kidding, by the way, actually. I went to just kind of look this up and see if I could find a Steam page or, like, you know, the developers page and, like, find a trailer. Yeah, the developers page and the trailer are both absolutely refusing to provide me with any details about what actually happens. Okay, sure, I'll add it to a long list we might look to at some point. Will we ever go back to Park Attack? Because I really enjoyed those videos. We will almost certainly go back to Park Attack. It's been a bit busy to visit Park Attack while we've been kind of going along in kind of the full release schedule of the end of the year, but we'll definitely be going back to it at some point. Probably when we hit the new year, we'll have a little bit of time to revisit that. I think, like, several new alphas have come out, so I definitely want to go back and visit how it's going along. The thing is, I'd rather make new videos when they've had, like, a whole bunch of new exciting stuff, and it feels like now, like, progress is a little bit slow, because it's a very, very small team that's producing. I think it's just, like, 2 or 3 people or something. So as a result of that, like, you know, each alpha is fairly similar to the one that's before it. So if I want, like, there to be clear progression in terms of, like, the versions that are coming out, it does need to be spaced out a bit, which is kind of what I'm thinking. But I'm sure we'll go and visit the new alpha in the new year, yes. And how did I feel about the ending of Dishonored 2? I felt it was a little bit confusing insofar as, in particular, yeah, the whole thing about how you have to, if you want to do it in, like, the pacifist fashion, you need to put Delilah on the throne, but in order to trap her in the painting, you carry her out of the painting and put her on a different throne, at which point she goes back in the painting, and then the painting gets sealed behind her. That genuinely feels like, someone pointed out in the comments, it kind of feels like someone actually misinterpreted a memo from above or something, and actually it was programmed incorrectly, and then they just kind of went with it because they didn't have time to change it. And I genuinely feel like that is true. Like, it feels like if you want to trap Delilah in the painting, then what you should do is you should knock Delilah unconscious within the painting world, prop her on the throne in the painting, leave the painting, and then do something to the rune on the throne in the real world that would close the portal up, because the throne in the real world's powering the portal, and that would leave her trapped in the portrait forever, at which point, like, the magic made her think she was in the real world or something. But that isn't what happens. You defeat her in the portrait world, carry her out, she decides to hop back. It's just weird. It strikes me as backwards. Like, I don't really mind that level, because it's pretty clear, even though I didn't do it perfectly, like, you could actually properly ghost the final boss fight by sneaking up behind every single one of the fake Delilahs and knocking them unconscious, which I think is actually really, really bloody cool. But, like, I don't know, I just find the ending itself confusing. Like I said in the video, I would have preferred it if the fake dark rune was harder to find and construct, and once you've done that, if you could plug it onto her throne, then basically she throws herself into the portrait, trying to, like, you know, lure you into a final battle, and then it immediately goes wrong and just traps her there forever, and you don't need to bother with the final boss fight, because if you're trying to do this in a pacifist alternative way, it makes sense there wouldn't be a final boss fight. So it's kind of a bit of a shame that you have to go into the painting anyway. I felt it would have been better if the final fight had actually been a lot shorter, because it would have been more fitting, it would have rewarded you more. I don't know, I just feel like they could have done something where you needed to search more, figuring out what's going on, kind of find more bits of information dotted around the level to learn about the rune, then maybe rather than just all the stuff you need actually being inside the chapel, you needed to go back outside to the early level and go to, like, the pump room and the greenhouse to find the ingredients and actually kind of get the ingredients from there and bring them back inside to make it, so it was much harder to make, but as a result, like, you spent much more time preparing for the fight with Delilah, and thus you could skip the fight entirely. I just feel like it could have been better, but I don't really mind it, because as I say, like, the fact I could ghost the entire fight if you're good enough, like, that makes it up for me a little bit. Like, I'm okay with it, it's just a bit of a confusing ending rather than a damp squib. If I formed a political party, what positions would I give to Claire and Dan? You think I'd let either of them anywhere near a sniff of actual political power? Bloody hell no. I saw you ask the Steep devs if you could use their game on YouTube. Will you be doing a video? I played Steep during its beta. I was unimpressed, to be honest. I don't think it's like a bad game. I think it's spectacularly pretty in terms of the snow. I just don't think it's for me, to be honest. I'm just not sure it's really my thing. So probably there won't be a video on that. But yeah, I did kind of give it like a brief go. It just didn't quite click with me. I don't get winter sports games. Would you do a Fallout 4 mod series? Not imminently, but never say never. That may well happen at some point. Do you ever find any of the compliments you get in comments weird, or do you just embrace them? Neither of those things. Sometimes you just shrug your shoulders and say, it's the internet and people are weird. Because, yeah, sometimes people are, and you don't know whether it's real or not, you know, people say some very odd things about how much they like my voice in hyperbolic and slightly sexual terms, and that's fine. Like, I'm not going to call them out on it because that might actually be real for them. I've no bloody clue. So I just kind of, let sleeping dogs lie, and then close the door on the sleeping dog and let the sleeping dog do whatever it wants, and whatever it does in the privacy of its own room is its own business. But sometimes I kind of, half raise an eyebrow, but I wouldn't exactly say I find it weird. I just kind of, you take it as it comes. It's part of being a YouTuber. Party Hard got new levels and DLC. Any chance you have time to play through those? I plan to, because it just picked up a cooperative multiplayer mode. In fact, me and Matt actually discussed doing it, and then we realised that the multiplayer mode is local co-op only, and Matt lives way up north in Liverpool, so that's very impractical. But had it been online, me and Matt would have actually already probably done a little multiplayer series on the Party Hard multiplayer, because yeah, we liked Party Hard, and Matt apparently really liked Party Hard as well. So sadly, that can't happen because it's local co-op only. It's not really Claire's sort of thing. So yeah, that's a shame. But maybe at some point, if Matt happens to be down and nearby, we might well do that anyway. What would your dream pantomime role be? I've never actually been inside a pantomime horse. I would love to be in a pantomime horse. Seriously, I would genuinely love it. Obviously the front half, you don't want to be the rear half. That would be incredibly embarrassing. No, I want to be the front half of a pantomime horse. My life will be complete when I can do that. Do you ever consider return investment before you buy a game? Not so much, because for the most part I receive review code from the developers. But the thing is, that's kind of essential, because if I didn't receive review code from a developer and I might only be doing a one-off video, then there's an excellent chance I would actually make a loss per video. Even not only would I be working for free, I'd make a loss anyway. Like Final Fantasy 15, it's important that the publisher provides us with review code, because not knowing ahead of time whether that becomes a series or not, and now having decided, not really my cup of tea. Fine, I see the appeal, but it's not really for me. There's only one video. That video probably didn't make enough ad revenue to cover the cost of the game. So that's kind of why that thing's kind of important, and why if a publisher doesn't provide review code, sometimes there just can't be a video, because it's never gonna make enough money to justify the purchase. I'd basically just be throwing away some money and losing a day of my time. So that's kind of why that's kind of important. So it doesn't really factor into purchasing decisions, but it does factor into why I can't purchase certain games if the publisher chooses not to provide them. How often do I do a retake of something? Very irregularly insofar as a full retake, but on occasion I will, if I just slightly fluff something insofar as I just kind of mutter or something, or I just kind of there's a slight noise of me clicking my teeth or my lips or whatever, then very often I'll just kind of say the same thing again, and I'll just kind of gently slide them together during editing. It's just kind of tiny little things that kind of just keeps the video running smooth, but I can't think of any major retakes I have to do for the most part. Any chance of a new co-op video with Claire in the near future? Hopefully. We haven't really done much recently, but Claire's got a fair bit of time off over December, I think, so hopefully we will be able to record something at the bare minimum between Christmas and New Year. So yeah, hopefully at some point we will get something done. Any chance of Mass Effect 3 before Andromeda? Possibly. It kind of depends when Andromeda comes out, to be honest, so I'm not 100% sure. I imagine at the bare minimum I do a mini-series of Mass Effect 3 immediately before Andromeda, even if we don't get to it otherwise. So I imagine that's probably what we'll do, yes. Since Patreon is all in US dollars, does the weak pound sterling benefit me? Yes. It actually does benefit me. Specifically, the question asked, does it actually influence my decision to continue working as a full-time YouTuber? It doesn't really influence that, because I'm doing this for a little while yet anyway, no matter what. But yes, it does actually directly benefit me, which is what's very, very nice right now. So thank you in particular, Americans, whose donation is now worth significantly more than it was before. David Mitchell or Richard Ionardi? I think he's pronounced... Is it Ionardi? I think his name's pronounced Ionardi. Sorry if I've just got that wrong. Probably Richard Ionardi, but that's a hard call. In Civ 6, if you were to go back to it, what Civ victory would you consider doing next and why? Now, I don't really want to say that just yet, because I do actually have in mind what I want to do next, but I like to keep some secrets. But I will say that, like, the next time I do a playthrough, I want it to be as different as possible from this one. So I kind of want everything to be a little bit different, so it's very fresh. So you can probably draw your own conclusions about the sort of thing I'm starting to think about there. But yeah, let's just keep some secrets for now. But Civ 6 will be back, and I do actually have something in mind for that that's very different. What is the square root of love? Hope. Because hope squared is love. Banana pudding or whiskey on the rocks? Well, if you put a gun to my head and force me to choose, I'd probably go for the whiskey, but could I not just have a cup of tea instead? Is there a reason you don't post the podcasts on your channel as well? Mainly because it would just be duplication of labour, to be honest. Like, editing it together is something that Matt does, so there'd be no point, like, both of us doing all of the editing to make it sound like as good as we can. So it's up on Dan's channel. And to be honest, I think everyone who wants it is already seeing it. So I'm not sure there's much value to having it on our channel, really. It would just be duplication of labour. Is Matt that much of a twat off camera? No, Matt's actually lovely. Will we ever get more stuff like this? There's a link. I'm going to click on the link now. What's the link? Ah, the link is the very first video on the channel, the Many a True Nerd vlog thing. Probably not at this point. Like, you know, the channel was very different back then. And when I say the channel was very different back then, the channel didn't exist back then. That was the first ever bloody video. So we've probably settled into a thing we're happy with right now. Like, if I made a massive change where I started doing, like, vlogs, I think some people would just be slightly confused. So probably we won't do too much more stuff like that. Though in all fairness, I try and do, like, the odd, like, IRL thing where we go out into London or whatever and, like, just go and do stuff. Like, we kind of did a little bit in when we did Pokemon Go, and just occasionally when we go out into London anyway. Like, maybe I'll try and do a little bit more of that stuff, because some of that stuff's fun sometimes. Will I ever be doing an episode or a series on Planet Coaster? Oh, Planet Coaster's interesting. The reason I don't do Planet Coaster is because I'm not sure I'm good enough to actually make something really good in it. Like, I can see, like, how if you've got the skill and the artistic ability and, like, the buildy credentials, you can build something incredible if you, like, spend enough time on it. But, like, having actually watched some of Dan's Planet Coaster series, like, I'm convinced that I couldn't do anything that good, and I could spend, like, 10 hours playing that and get one episode out of it in which, like, the thing I'd built wasn't even that impressive. So I might, like, do, like, the odd one-off. I'd never do a series because I feel like it would actually be a fairly boring series, because I feel like it's, I don't want to say it's a slow game because that sounds like a criticism. I think it's a slow game insofar as, like, there's so much you can do with it and so much you can just tinker with on the tiniest individual level that, like, I could spend many happy hours doing it, but it would be very, very inefficient insofar as, like, I could spend hours and hours and hours and get, like, a video that I think would not be that long and not even appeal to that many people. So I imagine I might do, like, the odd one-off. Like, in terms of, like, big strategy stuff, other than Rome Total War, probably the next thing I'm going to do is I'll probably look at, like, City Skylines at some point, do, like, a midweek mini-series on City Skylines. But I will look at Planet Coaster at some point, just, like, I'm genuinely conflicted onto whether I'd actually make good videos in Planet Coaster, because I suspect, actually, I'd make quite short videos and produce stuff that isn't even that impressive, because in terms of, like, art and buildy stuff, I'm not actually sure I'm that good at that sort of thing. If I was a character in Fallout New Vegas, where would I be and how would I relate to the player? I think I'd probably try and live in the Strip as far as possible, and I'd try and relate to the player as little as possible. I'd just be a generic, unnamed NPC that sits there and doesn't do anything. Because as a general rule, people who have names and say too much in Fallout New Vegas have a severe risk of potentially being killed. So, you know, I just try and stay out of the way. I'd just happily be an unnamed NPC as long as I was somewhere safe from the Legion. Will you do a silent ninja run of Hitman Hokkaido? I sloppily pulled it off and curious to see how you do it. I might go and do some challenge stuff in Hitman Episode 6. We shall see. I don't really have a kind of a time in mind for that, so possibly not sure. With all the stealth stuff you've been doing lately, I'm still waiting for you to finally do some Metal Gear Solid. Oh, me and Metal Gear Solid fell out a long time ago, Stephen Fraser, who asked that question. Me and Metal Gear Solid, we don't get on. I played Metal Gear Solid the Twin Snakes on GameCube, and I still haven't forgiven the franchise because that game was terrible, terrible, terrible. So goddamn bad. Right, maybe at some point I'll go and give the franchise another go, but I'm not sure, like, over a decade on, I'm ready to forgive. Twin Snakes was truly abysmal. Do you have any profound life advice for a 19-year-old? No. The most profound life advice I can come up to as someone who's 30 is every single stage of my life, or I've assumed the next stage of my life is the one where I'm going to achieve true wisdom and be a proper full personal, whatever. Basically, every single time that happens, I find myself with just more questions, just in a slightly different area. Basically, the most profound advice I can give you is just you do you. You do you, and you do what makes you happy right now, and don't worry about it. As long as you're not hurting anyone else, and as long as you're not clearly screwing up your future, you just do whatever makes you happy, and don't worry about it. Because it doesn't matter what you do, in 5 years' time, you'll probably look back and cringe, and then 5 years after that, that person will look back on you then and cringe about that as well. So just you do you. Chill out. It's all good. Have you ever read any Irish history? No, actually. I'm embarrassingly ignorant about some of the history of the British Isles. There's a bit of a gap in my knowledge, because my knowledge is very, very time-locked to certain areas. So, I know an awful lot about Roman Britain, and kind of, the fate of Britain immediately after the Romans left, and what was happening kind of before and during the invasions and whatever. Then there's a bit of a gap in my knowledge. So my knowledge of, for example, kind of Welsh and Irish history in particular is extremely flimsy. My knowledge of Scottish history is a tiny bit better, because like English and Scottish history are kind of tied together a bit more closely. But yeah, my knowledge of Welsh and Irish history is embarrassingly poor, so I do apologise to my Celtic brethren. Any news on the new podcast episode? Should be one next week. Dan has tweeted that out. So yes, we should be back on this week. Dan is apparently satisfied in how he got married and got honeymooned, so we've got a new one coming up soon. I think he might want to change the format slightly, I don't know, but my understanding is we do have another one coming up next week, yes. Any chance of some tactical turn-based combat like XCOM or Invisible Ink? Oh, never say never. It's not kind of planned for imminently, but I imagine we will do something like that sooner or later, yes. Just heard about The Last of Us Part 2. Would you consider playing The Last of Us for the channel in the lead up to that? Now, Last of Us is interesting. Naughty Dog are a little bit odd, which is Naughty Dog have technically never actually given a blanket permission for YouTubers to make videos. In fact, they have in the past stated they don't really like YouTubers making videos. I think because like their games are so story focused, they don't really like the stories being up on YouTube, because if people can just see all the story stuff on YouTube and the games are fairly linear and narrative heavy, then people would have less reason to play the games. I don't know if maybe they've changed their position slightly. At one point in the past, at the time when the original Last of Us came out, I did check, and at that point their position was they don't really like YouTubers. So I just didn't do Last of Us because I respect the opinion of the developers. If they say they don't want YouTube coverage, I respect that. But I may well kind of look into it ahead of Last of Us 2 and see if that's changed at all, and whether they're like happier with it now, because sometimes over time publishers do change their position, so maybe they've become a bit more liberal in that regard. We shall see. And finally, one more question. What happened to the videos of the old Watch Dogs series? The original Watch Dogs series never actually got finished. I was still working full time then, so sometimes series just kind of ended. I've actually kind of had a thought about this. This actually kind of sparked me to remember to do this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make an unlisted video, and I'm going to add it to the end of the Watch Dogs playlist, so people who actually are watching the Watch Dogs playlist will actually get an ending of sorts. It won't actually be the end of the game, because that will take hours and hours and hours. I'm just going to make something, basically just like a little joke to also wrap up the series and just clearly kind of confirm, hey, just so you know, this was never actually finished. But I'm going to put something in that Watch Dogs 1 playlist, which will kind of be seen by a very tiny number of people, but I just kind of like those little jokes hidden away in the channel where, like, if you happen to go through the back catalogue and watch everything, you'll just stumble across the odd thing that very few people see. So I will get around to that at some point over the next few weeks and add that in, and won't that be lovely? Oh, sorry, there was one more question. I literally just reloaded the page, and there was one more question that literally just appeared. Why do you do 60 FPS? It just loads twice as much for little gain and screws over people with bad internet. 60 FPS is interesting, actually, because 60 FPS is the sort of thing that people who do have the internet for it, if it's not there, they moan about it, but some people who don't have the internet for it, therefore kind of object to it, because it means, like, they would normally be able to watch, like, 720 or 1080p if it was at 30 FPS, but can't handle it at 60, so have to go down to 480. It's kind of a situation that's not going to make everyone happy, so on balance, I generally make the call of, like, if I think a game benefits from 60, I'll put it up at 60, but like stuff like strategy stuff, I'll just always put up at 30, because there's not like rapid movement or whatever, there's not really much benefit whatsoever to it being a 60, so I just keep it at 30. So probably in the event that either option's going to make somebody upset, I'd rather have the highest quality video that I can actually have. So there you are, that is the end of the questions for this month. Sorry this one was late, it wasn't even supposed to be. It was flipping supposed to be on time. Next time, by next one, we should actually be a little bit more relaxed, little bit more relaxed. Well, I say that. We'll be a bit more relaxed because there's less games, but we'll be a little bit less relaxed because we'll be either on the cusp or just into January. And January is the month where YouTubers go to die. Sorry, that was a bit dramatic. It's rather just the time when our income's going to drop off a cliff. But that's what Patreon's for, so I'm much less worried this year. Everything's good. Thank you all so very, very much. You're awesome. You keep all of this stuff going on. If you want any follow-up answers or whatever, do leave them in the YouTube comments or the comments of Patreon. Obviously, I'll keep an eye on those and get back to you. And other than that, I will see you in a month's time. But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, I've been John. This has been many a true nerd. Do I normally do the usual outro? I don't know if I normally do the usual outro. I think I do the usual outro. And this has been the Patroncast for kind of November anyway. Thank you very much, and goodbye.